Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Caseware webinar. Today we'll be looking at an introduction to mapping. This is an introductory level webinar, and today we will be presented by James Wright, one of the education and media technicians here at Caseware. Before I pass over to James to begin today's presentation, just some quick housekeeping elements. If you do have any questions during today's webinar, please feel free to send them over to us via the Q&A function on your Zoom control panel. I'll do my best to answer the questions, and obviously we'll pass them over to James at the end within the Q&A session, so that we can share those obviously with everyone in today's webinar. But yeah, any questions that you do have on mapping, or if anyone's having any issues with sound for any reason, or can't see the screen, then again, please feel free to chuck those into the Zoom control panel on the Q&A function. So I'm now going to pass you over to James to begin today's webinar. Thank you, James.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to the webinar. We're just going to go through the agenda for today. So today's agenda in regards to the introduction of mapping, we're going to go through describing the mapping concept itself, so the correlation between Caseware and your trial balance, examples of map masking, accessing and navigating around the assign mapping menu, so getting you nice and comfortable with that, and giving you the right techniques in which to make your mapping more efficient and easier. Adjusting basic mapping properties and inserting extra map numbers if you need them later on. So what is mapping and what's the concept of mapping? Well, basically what we're doing with mapping is converting your nominal code or your trial balance, whether that's imported from Sage, Xero, QuickBooks or Excel. We're converting those nominal codes into map codes. The map codes are what Caseware uses. It's kind of its own language. Is what it uses to know where those figures are going to go on the face of the accounts. So this is just more of an in-depth in regards to the structure of the codes themselves, the formatting. So what you'll find is you'll have a 9-character code for all the accounts advanced, charity and academy, what we refer to as the V4 templates. And then you'll find that you'll have 7-character map codes for anything V3 based, which is the non-corp and pension side of things. The reason why I say this is if you're working on an older file and you're expecting to be working on, say, the accounts advanced template, a good indication that you're working on the wrong file as such, or you haven't done the conversion process, is that when you go to your mapping, the code will be actually 2 characters shorter on there. So if you do see that, just stop for a second before you do any more work, do the conversion, and then you can do the mapping correctly on the latest version of that template, for example. Okay, so just going over the actual structure of our map codes that we have here. So what you'll find is if you were to take a screenshot of this screen, feel free to do it while we're on here. You'll be able to learn this off by heart, and then it will make your mapping life a lot easier in the future. So you'll notice it reserves the H code for the accounts advanced. You'll notice I've also drawn a line in the middle of the screen there. And this is to represent that even between the accounts advanced corporate template and the charities and academies template, the first few codes A to H are all the same. So you don't have to worry about relearning them between the templates. The only change is from the J and L codes on respectively downwards. And you can also see everything balance sheet on the top there. So A to H is for balance sheet, and then for the accounts corporate, L to X is for the income statement. That's what it will be populating. And the charities and academy, J to Y is for the sofa there. Okay, so looking at the breakdown of map codes themselves, we refer to map codes by their level, and the level is used. A full stop is used to break up the levels here. So earlier I said that we have a 9-character code normally. It will start with an alphabetical letter, and then it will have 2 numbers before the first full stop. This section, if you can see my mouse here, this is what we'd refer to as a level 1 map code, so the first level of map codes. What this essentially means is that we're looking at all the figures under the umbrella of, say, in this case, AO1, which is tangible fixed assets. So everything within there, your plant machinery and any other kind of like freehold property codes will all be accumulated under that amount there. So in theory, you'd get a total of everything included, all the figures included. Moving along, we've got the map level 2 here. So in this case, we're just breaking it down. What we refer to as drilling down in more detail. So AO101 in this case is freehold property. O2 is long-term leasehold property, and then O3 is short-term leasehold property. We do have a third level of mapping, which isn't shown here, but the reason for that is, as you can see in the full level, the fourth level, it's normally a 00. And the reason for this is we've made it a 00, so it allows us to have a larger scope for the template going forwards. If we were to add in additional map codes and we needed that extra space to add in a new code, for example, on the third level, we would use those, essentially the blank space, the 00s, to include that. There are some notes which will have a third level code in there, and specifically the derivatives and the share capitals notes, they will use the third level, so just be wary of that. And then we have the fourth level, the full level, fully drilled down into the map code itself. That's the lowest we can go. We can place multiple nominals under one map code, and it will show an aggregate figure of those map codes, of those account codes, sorry. The good thing about this is, again, the structure is very similar across the board for all map codes. So as long as you learn that, say, for example, if it ends in an 01, it's going to be a brought forward figure. Ends in an 02, it's going to be additions. 04 for disposals, and 05 for revaluation surplus, essentially. As long as you learn that, then that code structure will be reflected across all the map codes. So no matter where you go, you'll know that 01 is brought forward. It just helps to speed up the mapping process there. And the interesting thing about this is it's reflected for the depreciation as well, as you can see here. So 51 is the brought forward, 52 is the charge, so it's essentially the equivalent of an addition. 54 is the equivalent of the disposals as well. So that's something to bear in mind to speed up your mapping process. Okay, so why would we want to use a different combination of mapping masks, for example? So in this example, we have AO1 and then 2 question marks, OO and then O2, and that's just referring to a cell on the face of the account here. The double question marks insinuates that we don't know what the number is there, but any number can fill this spot. So we end up getting a figure that's a combination of all the codes within AO1. So as we saw earlier, that's our tangible fixed asset. But then we're taking everything within the O2 codes on the end. So the full level mapping is O2, which we know from here is the disposals. So we're taking everything from within the tangible fixed asset section, and that can be anything under map level 2, but we just want the additions there. So that's a good use of mapping and map masks. You may also see as well, you may also see that there's an asterisk sometimes after a map code, and all that essentially means is everything after this map code. So if it was AO1 there with dot and then an asterisk, it just means that we're taking every single figure under AO1. Perfect. So now let's just move on to kind of like navigating and using the assign mapping screen. Just going to close the slide there and open up my caseware here. Just going to close that off. Perfect. So we've got a caseware file here, and for today's purposes, we've already imported the TV. We're not going to do that, and we've also already mapped the majority of the figures here, just so we can speed things up. So to access your mapping, or to at least see the map codes that you have available, there are 2 ways to do this. So we can first of all go through to the trial balance button here and view our trial balance directly. As you can see here, we've got our map numbers on this column here. So we know exactly what figures are mapped at this point. If I click that and then scroll all the way down, should then be able to see, there we go, we have a section whereby these figures aren't mapped. If we wanted to map them from here, we can simply click the drop down and use this menu to say go through and map the figure, click it and click select there. For obvious reasons, this is really slow and we don't really want to do it this way if we're mapping quite a few figures. Also, just to bear in mind, if you don't have this map number column available, just right click and go under the show menu here, and you'll just see map number there. Select to turn it on. So yes, instead of doing it through a trial balance, which is a bit tedious and slow, if you want to do it for, say, the occasional map code that you need to change later on, there's no worries with doing it this way. But instead, what we want to do is go up to the account tab at the top here and select assign mapping. That'll open up this lovely window for us here. Yours might not look like this, and what I will say is by default it won't. By default, you won't have this balance column and prior year balance and prior year balance, second prior year balance as well. So what you want to do is just right click again in the white space here and use the buttons here to turn them on. So here it says to hide balance, but for you it would be to show balance. Another thing that I like to suggest here is make sure that you've adjusted your columns. By default, the map number column is quite small, and so whenever we expand it out, we can't see the map code. If we just open that up a bit more, we can see the full map code there. It just makes it a bit easier to read. Perfect. So now we've just covered the basic setup. We're just going to go through a couple of the features within this screen. So on the left of the screen, you'll see all your unmapped accounts. They include your nominal numbers, nominal codes, or your account numbers, and the description, as well as the amounts assigned to the different years. And on the right-hand side of the screen, we see our map numbers. And within here, we can see already that we do have some figures mapped, as you can see by these columns that have been filled in. Essentially, what we want to do is move the unmapped numbers over to the mapped numbers side. We want to map them across. To make life a bit easier, if we were going to, if we didn't know, or we had a full sheet of nominal codes and we didn't know, say, where our bank account one code was, we can actually use these search bars at the top. So you might see that this one is for the search number, so the nominal code. So say if I were to find the C15 or the C27, I couldn't find it, but I knew it was C27. I can just type in and it will show me that code on its own. Similarly, we've got the same feature for searching for the actual name of the code. And over on the map numbers side, we have the exact same thing reflected here for the name of the map code itself. So the mapping area, they're also named, so you can search by that. For example, if I were to do revaluation, stock, for example, I put stock in here, find my stock code, come over to this side, type in stock as well, and it will start showing me the codes which refer to stock here. So I can just quickly drag and drop across if you need to find the codes. We can do the same thing with map numbers here as well. So the A01, I can type in A01, then dot and put in as far down the list as I want to go, as far down the levels as I want to drill, for example. You may also see up in the top left here, we have this drop down for yearly. Now, Caseware is the company is an international piece of software. The working papers part is, and we provide the UK template. But because it's international, it's meant to work for many different countries. In this example, if you're making accounts with our template, this drop down should always say yearly. If it's not, do just get in contact with our support team and we'll just show you how to change that on the actual engagement properties there, as you should be reporting to a yearly period. At the bottom of the screen here, we have our options: OK, apply, map, cancel, and help. So the OK and the apply button will do essentially the same thing. So an OK is an apply, but will close down the window for you. The apply button will obviously apply any mapping that you've done. To map the codes, what we'll do is we'll take the plant and machinery brought forward here, and we'll use that map button at the bottom. So we've got CW25 plant machinery brought forward. And I know that this is under the A01 code, and I can then find plant machinery, which is at 04. And before I expand it to the final and fourth level, if it's a brought forward code, just remember earlier we said we got the same structure across all codes. So I'm expecting this to be under an 01, hopefully it is, for a brought forward code. So there we go, we've got 01, 04, and then ending in 01 for the brought forward there. So all I want to do is select the actual map itself. We've already got a figure assigned here, but we can ignore that. I want to select the figure, the map code itself, the end map code. I've already selected the figure that I want to map across, and you can see it's got a little grey outline around it there. And then at the bottom of the screen, I can select to map. and that just maps it across. If I wanted to unmap this, just select it again and select unmap. This process can be done by dragging the amount across as well if you wanted to do it that way. So I can drag this figure. You see I've got a grasp of it there, and just drop it on top of the map code. Perfect. One thing to be aware of, I've just seen at the top here, we've got our net ink amount. What you want to do is not map that. That's an exception to this process. Essentially, it's not needed for our accounts, and it will end up doubling your profit and loss amount, essentially. So if you do see that, then that's probably the reason why. If you do map it, no problem, you can unmap it and just reapply the settings. Speaking of applying, now we've done our mapping, we can then go to the bottom left and hit apply. And you'll see that the figure will update to reflect my changes. So don't worry if the map code doesn't have the correct amount applied to it, just hit the apply button and it will reflect that. So moving on, we're also going through the use of a keyboard as well today. So some people, I know Tony within our organization likes to use the keyboard for mapping. I'm not too sure as to why, but he prefers the ability to just use the keyboard instead of the mouse. So in that example, what you can do is use the up and down arrows, obviously, to move between the map codes. The left and right to open and close the different areas. So that's all left, and this is all right. Keep hitting right, and it'll open up and expand all the way to the fourth level of mapping. What you can then do is obviously select your amount. If it were motor vehicles, we can go and find motor vehicles, open motor vehicles up, and this is the brought forward. So we're looking for the 01 here. And then I can hit space, and that will map across automatically for me. And same again, you can unmap with space as well. Perfect. So what we're just going to do is just continue just to quickly map these out. So we've got the plant machinery depreciation. So as earlier I said, there was a 51 for the depreciation, but this is a brought forward. Oh no, sorry, it's not. It's the additions. The charge. Sorry, there we go. The depreciation charge. I'll get it right there. So we've got the depreciation charge, and for the charge, it's just under the owed. So the owed 52 there, as we said earlier, similar to the additions. So I can drop that in. I've got the additions for the plant machinery. So while I'm here, I just drop that into the O2 code. And I've got plant machinery, which I know I had that under brought forward before. That's fine. Oh, that's the addition. Sorry, we'll pop that. And oh, there we go. Wonderful. Okie dokie. And then we can hit apply, and my figures should update to reflect that. Perfect. There may be some instances where you want to essentially map a code which isn't there. So, for example, a good example of this is, say, stock, for example. You say if you ran out of codes in the stock area. So if I go to stock, so cost of sales, and then we want to add our stock in here. Say, for example, direct cost, directors, subcontractors, they're either all full up with information, or I don't want to use them because they don't reflect what the amount is that's held in there. What I can use are some spare codes. So as you can see here at the bottom of the screen under M20, not the motorway, we've got our cost of sales spare codes, and there are quite a number of them within here. So you've got quite a few options in which to map. So I can just expand these out, and these are essentially blank slates for you to start mapping to. So for this example, I'll take my stock amount and just pop it under the spare code here. Now you may say, well, how is this going to be reflected on the accounts? It will be reflected on the accounts as a spare code, but what we can do is we can change the properties of the map code itself. So if we right click on spare, hit properties, we can then change the name. So we could say that this is just a stock spare I could put in, but you can make it a lot more interesting, and then hit OK on the stock spare. There we go, stock spare. Perfect. So then that will be reflected on the note within the actual description for the row. But say, for example, we didn't have the options of spares here, or it were in, say, a different area of mapping, and we wanted to add in a new map code. Well, we can do that. Similarly with the right-click button on here, so we can say right-click within M2001. We'll go to the third level, actually. Perfect. Oh, there we go. close that down. There we go. So we'll right click in M2001 and we'll start from there. We're going to be adding a map code to the end, to the third level first and then to the fourth level. So we right click and the second option down is to add in a new map number. So this will automatically populate the map number, what it thinks we want. Obviously, if you don't want it to be that, you can change it. In this example, we kind of want to keep the same structure as we have on the rest of the account. So we know that the third level of mapping is usually an 01 unless it's a different circumstance. But in this case, I do want it to be 00, so 00, sorry, for the spacing. And I can pop in a name for this. So this is just going to be my spare example. And I can change the type to either balance sheet or income statement. You remember earlier on the slide, we had the line across. I believe it was everything up to the H code was the balance sheet and everything below is the income statement. So it's your choice on this front as to what you want to map it to. But obviously in this case, it's going to be suggesting based on the properties of M2001 as to what M200100 should be. So in this case, I'm going to leave it as the income statement and click apply. Oh, it's saying that already exists, unfortunately. Okay, we'll use 01 for this example. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got our 0001 in there, just there. And then we want to make a fourth level that we can actually assign a code to. So if you see right now, my bank account current amount, for example, we'll try and map it to this. It doesn't allow us to. And this is because this is an unassigned amount. If I right click and just open up the properties, the behavior type is unassignable. If we wanted to assign to this, we'd want to change it to normal. However, that's not best practice for the structure, as we know. So we want to then make ourselves a fourth level, fully drilled down map number. If we right click again, add a new map number in, and again, it's going to try and fill in for us here. So for example, this 01, the best practice would be a brought forward amount. So I'm going to pop in spare example, spell there, perfect. And I can do brought forward on here. Oh, there we go. And then I want to change this behavior type to normal. So I can actually assign to it and then hit OK. And as you can see, if I expand that out, we've got a fully made map code there. And I could, for example, grab my stock amount, drop it in there as the brought forward, and then hit apply. There we go. That's fine. It's just going to recalculate because we made these changes. Perfect. Okay, so then moving on to something like a bank and current account, we're now talking about the flip codes. And the best way to show this in my mind is to look at the bank account code. So we'll look at the CO for just here. And the good example of this is, unfortunately, the pandemic. So 1 year in the pandemic, we could have a large amount, a debit amount in our bank account. And then as soon as the pandemic hit, we could be forced to go into a credited amount, essentially an overdraft with the bank. But how do we want this to reflect in the accounts? If I've already applied this to the CO1 area, which is typically a debit area, surely it's going to be pulling through a negative figure to a credit code on a credit note, for example, on the accounts. Well, what we use are flip codes, and flip codes are pretty intuitive. They'll essentially look at the figure and see that if it's a positive, we're going to pop it where the map code is for the actual property there. So if I right click on the O2 here, I'll open up properties. And if it's correct, we're going to be popping it under the CO40102. However, if it's a negative amount, we're going to be popping it under the flip equivalent of this amount. So as you can see here in the drop down, map number flip, and that's going to the DO20102, same exact structure afterwards, but it's just going to the DO2 code because they reflected the credited amount. So if I go down here, DO202, and that'll be under a loans amount for the negative figures. Now, you may have noticed for the keen-eyed of you in the audience that we've got a flip button up in the top right there. What this does is if I click it, you'll notice that our unmapped window becomes a lot larger, and you think, oh, well, I've thought I've mapped everything. Well, this is just to reflect all the codes which are mapped to a map code which doesn't already have a flip alternative added to it. So don't worry about that. What we actually want to see here is the right-hand side will show us all the figures which are flipped, which do have a flipped equivalent and are mapped. And if I want to just change it back to the normal view, I select it again in the top right, and it will flip me back to the normal view here. If you want to do this on the trial balance, speed up things, you can do it by right-clicking and going to the show area, and then showing the map number flip, which is hidden on here. I don't know where it's gone. It should be. There we go. That's the description. I think it might just be off to the corner. Ah, there it is. It's just hidden on this one. It's already turned on. That's why. So yeah, we've got the map number flip here, and we can see quickly that that this 1200 bank current account number 1 is already mapped here to a flip code. So if it does go negative, that's where it's going to end up. And that's a good example of you look at your figure, you expect it to be mapped to the CO4 area, but it's not appearing there. Just look and see if it's got a flip equivalent, and that will be changing the behavior of where that code ends up. Perfect. So just wrapping around, I think we've covered just about everything we had on the agenda for today. What I'm going to do is just hand back over to Phil, and we'll just go through any questions that you have in regards to this.
Thank you, James. We did have a couple of questions come in. Firstly, asking if you can reaffirm how you found or how you got to the assign mapping screen.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, it's just through the working papers here, and then the top bar just at the top here has lots of different tabs on it. We want to be selecting the account tab, and then there's the assign mappings button here. I wish I could zoom in with this laptop, but I can't, unfortunately. But if you just see there where I'm hovering, assign mappings, and you can select that, and it'll open up the window for you.
Excellent. The only other question is, you mentioned you used the spare code for the stocks.
Yes.
Are there spare codes for other areas such as admin expenses and
if I type in spare on the search, we should be able to get all the spares that are available. So we're using the search function again. And so, yeah, as you can see here, there aren't spares for everything, to my knowledge, just the areas that we believe are applicable by default. But obviously you can go in and create your own spare codes. As we showed earlier, we can create our map codes. So you could set up a whole host suite of spare codes if you needed to. Yeah, admin section. Yes, we do have spare codes for the R codes there. The R90 has a load of spare codes.
I think the spare codes are mainly for the P&L side rather than the balance sheet.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Thank you. That's all the questions. Oh, sorry, just had one.
Oh.
Let me just have a look at this question. Just taking over the accounts for company notes or something. Okay. I'll pass on to you, James. Someone has taken over the accounts for a company and has noticed that some of the mapping should be changed. There are balances on the prior year. If they change the mapping, would that also change the prior year figures?
Yeah, so they are connected essentially. So anything within this row for bank current account, that will be changed. So anything in the prior year, I believe we suggest to do, if you want to do a movement between map codes, it would be essentially creating a new nominal. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil. So you do a new nominal and you do an adjusting journal between the two codes. So the codes in the prior year, we want to leave the amounts there, but we want to take the current year amount from the old code, the old nominal account code, and pull it down to the new code that we've got and map that elsewhere. So do the change. So that's how I would do it personally. Is that what you suggest, Phil?
Yeah, no, exactly that. Another question was, can you add a code through the trial balance? So I assume that's through the trial balance screen. I don't know if that's linked to this. So you can add a map code in there. You can also you can also use the new button, not that the one that's to make new map codes. But if you close out this screen, if you're referring to nominal codes, you've got the new button on the left hand side. So I'm not quite sure whether you're referring to map codes or nominal codes, but in that split that James just mentioned, you can create new nominal codes and then do the journal in here, then use obviously the adjusting journal screen.
There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Just have a look and see if there are any more questions. Obviously, if the questions that you've got, or if anyone does have any other questions, please feel free to chuck them into the chat feature. It doesn't look like we're getting any more questions in at the moment, James. I don't know if you want to chuck it back to the slides.
Yeah, no problem. We'll just run through the end of the slides here then. Okie dokie. So there we go. Yeah, I'll just do the closeout slides as well. So yeah, just for any of the other upcoming webinars, we'll just jump onto our website, caseware.co.uk/events. It's not just for the webinars, it also shows any of the live conferences we're going to run or anything like that. So for everything Caseware and any events we're running, jump onto that site. I know we've got an EPAC release webinar coming up pretty soon, so do just jump on there and register today. Quick reminder that we've also got a LinkedIn and YouTube channel as well. So all the recordings of the webinars will be featured on the YouTube channel under the relevant playlist for webinars there. And all posts for any upcoming webinars will be on the LinkedIn client services page. So just jump on there and you'll be notified with the post for any upcoming webinars. And useful e-course information. To be perfectly honest, a lot of getting started guides get posted on there as well. Finally, visit our help site, help.caseware.co.uk. It's completely free. You don't have to pay for a profile to be set up. So do go ahead and use the articles which are available there. There is an option to do a live chat with a support representative, as well as all the contact information for our support team as well if you need to get in contact. Perfect. Fantastic. I believe that rounds up today's webinar, and thank you for joining us today.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.